All right, this week looking at critical thinking and how to write well. A lot of different tools here, a lot of really fascinating information and good information to sort of. It's what's kind of funny for me is that it seems the more I read about critical thinking, creative thinking, the more it requires me to think critically and think creatively. And so I feel like I'm improve. It's almost it's going hand in hand here. I'm improving while also learning about it and talking about it. So that's a good thing. A lot of these, what I've found is a lot of this stuff, and as we were specifically talking about writing this week, um, but a lot of the information that I take in and where my mind immediately goes to relates to coaching and teaching, specifically coaching my basketball team and how I can kind of relate sort of some ideas to that. So I'll do a lot of comparison with that with all of the all four. I guess I have four different kind of topics to discuss this week, and with that we'll get started. First, I want to look at the book. Chapter 3 of Critical Thinking is titled "Becoming a Fair-Minded Thinker." This part, the part that stuck out to me the most about this one specifically is intellectual courage. Being willing to challenge beliefs. I think this, although I mentioned specifically with my being a coach and how it relates to being a coach, this kind of is actually, I think, very prevalent and in the forefront in today's social media society, especially during election time on Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media you choose to partake in. Intellectual courage specifically is willingness to face and to fairly assess ideas or beliefs or viewpoints that you don't necessarily have a share or that create strong negative reactions in your mind. That's from page 31 of the chapter 3, Becoming a Fair-Minded Thinker. Intellectual cowardice is the egocentric tendency to fear the ideas. Basically, if it's different than ours, then we fear those, and because they're different, and the tendency to, and it's also to fear the ability to examine those beliefs. And so, I think that I've learned over the past, as I've sort of matured and becoming I guess an adult, depending on who you ask. If you ask my wife, she might consider it differently sometimes. But I've learned that it's okay to have different thoughts or different beliefs, and it's also okay to challenge your own thoughts and your own beliefs. And it creates healthy conversation. It creates healthy thought. It creates healthy dialogue that moves us forward individually and then as a group, whatever collective you're involved in. If you're not able to sort of challenge yourself and then also challenge others while fairly assessing or fairly thinking about their ideas, then it's really tough to get anywhere. It's tough. Then it just becomes a bunch of finger pointing, becomes a bunch of negativity, and it's not enjoyable. It's not productive. It certainly isn't productive. And so I think that's that part of the chapter, while it discusses being an intellectual courage and how we may already have our beliefs and they may have arisen over time, or they may be learned beliefs. We Having intellectual courage will allow you to become a much more successful critical thinker, because you're able to actually have conversation and be productive. In chapter 8, it talks. The title of chapter 8 is "Design Your Life." There's a question on page 168. Think back on the learning experiences you've had in your life, as well as the opportunities for learning you have, and answer the questions. To what extent would you say you've been a passive learner, and what extent have you actively sought out opportunities for learning? This is something I think about a lot. It seems, I think, a peer pressure thing that I've noticed through my friend group growing up is like I can definitely tell those who are willing to be passive learner are willing to be active learners and those who are conceding and fine with being passive learners. I think as a teacher and a coach, you always have to be actively pursuing knowledge, whether it be basketball specifically. Again, I always have to be trying to stay on top of everything. There's going to be new things that come out every year, new offenses, new defenses, new systems, and so you always have to be active about that. And by allowing yourself to become a passive learner, you can get behind, quite frankly. And then also, as we talk about critical thinking throughout this whole process, you're never going to become your best thinker, your best critical thinking self, if you are passive in nature, if you're not actively pursuing, thinking and actively pursuing knowledge as well and learning. A lot of that can come through different areas as we grow older and we have different different careers and different paths that life takes us down. Learn to what do you want to learn about. Learning kind of becomes very specific to what your experiences are and what you hope your experiences to be. Looking at the article, the article titled "The Very Idea of Critical and Creative Thinking." It talks a lot about critical and creative thought, both being achievements of thought, and it's not they're not mutually exclusive. They go hand in hand, very much so. Creative thinking is mastering the process of making or producing, and critical thinking is mastering the process of assessing and judging. Essentially, what the article discusses is being able to engage in high-level thinking requires both critical and creative thinking. And I discussed this in a roundabout way with my basketball team. When we watch film on an opponent and we're looking at areas that we struggled in and didn't have success, we have to be able to think critically about what is this that is not allowing us to have success? What does it look like? Where is it coming from? And those various thought processes on being able to analyze ourselves critically. It's easy for me to do as a coach now. It's hard for players to do, but as you try to teach the players, how do you think critically about where you're at? Are you just looking at yourself on the screen as if you're watching a regular basketball game, or are you watching yourself to try to analyze how you can improve? And then being able to think creatively and produce creative thought is what will allow us to make adjustments for the next time we face that opponent. So how are we going to run this certain play, or how are we going to defend this certain action the next time out? And so I can really translate that, again, as I mentioned at the top. I can translate that, and to be able to generate purposeful thinking, you have to be able to do both of those. And I don't really necessarily say the words thinking, critical and creative thinking to my players specifically, but I have to try to communicate that so that they understand how to do both of those in the as it relates to specifically to basketball. And then in the video, kind of also going hand in hand with that coaching, the video titled "How to Teach Students to Write Well." Dr. Paul talks about it's not going to be analytic writing unless there's one problem, one issue, or one question that we're trying to figure out. And oftentimes there is, again, if you're critically thinking or analyzing our game film, let's say on basketball, there's a problem. Likely, there's something that we need to try to determine. He mentions you don't reason for no reason. And if there isn't a problem, then don't reason about it. And again, that relates specifically to basketball and to coaching. If it ain't, the old dialogue coaches like to have with each other. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's kind of the truth. And again, if there isn't a problem, then don't reason about it. In writing, after you reason, Dr. Paul talks about the next part. There's two parts to it. You have to reason about whatever the topic is that you're trying to learn, and you're trying to to learn about and to portray to your audience. And then the next part of that is communicating that thought. And this for me is such a key point. And it's very applicable to my life as a teacher and as a coach. It doesn't matter how much I know unless I'm able to successfully communicate that to my students or to my players or to my coaches or to whatever audience that I have at the time. And so being able to do both of those, both think and reason at a high level, collect those thoughts at much like in writing, and then being able to communicate that through, and as we discussed writing, it would be these papers that we may be writing, or if we write for a publication, or in specific in my case, being able to communicate my reasoning to my team and to those involved with our basketball program. So that's all I got for now. A little bit longer than 6 minutes, but hopefully some of that makes sense to you. And I know it certainly does to me, because I relate everything to my experiences. But I think that's the best way for me to get to sort of share my thoughts as we go throughout this process. Thank you.